89 and 129, and then we'll close out for the day. So item 88, Rick.
Item 88. Commissioners, item 88 is an action item proposing to amend 8 new shop projects. Please note the pink meeting handout. Staff has reviewed the projects. They are consistent with the Transportation Asset Management Plan, and staff recommends your approval.
Second.
Motion by Tavaloni, second by Arp. Any questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Item 89.
Yes, Commissioners. Item 89 is a shop amendment to add 11 projects. These projects relate to the zero-emission vehicles. The department is proposing that with this amendment that these projects upgrade electrical systems at their rest stops, construct charging station pads, purchase and install ZEF chargers, and install signs and restripe parking spaces. Certain parts of these things are not eligible for shop funding, specifically because the shop says the shop is for funding major capital improvements that are necessary to preserve and protect the state highway system. Purchasing new equipment is not part of the charge of the shop under Government Code Section 14.526.4. Staff would be suggesting that we change slightly the scope of these projects, do amend them in, but change the scope by eliminating the purchase and installation of the ZEF charging units themselves. Those should be purchased and installed through another program like the STIP or bond programs, or through partnerships, or through electrical companies or car manufacturers. On top of that, staff noticed that some of these projects have a capital to support ratio of 150%. That seems to be very excessive. Staff would recommend that these projects be kept to a capital to support expenditure ratio of 50%. With these changes, staff would recommend that you approve this shop amendment.
Motion by Gilmetti,
I'll second.
second by Art. We have questions. Christine, Jim, then Jim. Up high.
Where's your button?
Are these mine? Right there. Oh, perfect. Thank you. I just have a few questions. First for Stephen, if that's all right.
Certainly.
I understood you say at least part of this project is not eligible for the shop
Correct.
funding, though that's what's identified in the report, correct?
Correct.
And you call the soft costs excessive. Can you give us a little more detail on that?
Well, some of these, when I looked through them, some of them have support costs that are 150% of the capital cost. So what we're proposing is that Caltrans keep itself to a support cost of only 50% of the capital cost. Obviously, if it costs more, then they would have to come back to the commission and request additional funds and explain why they would need additional funds.
And the total cost of the 11 projects is about, am I reading that right?
Total cost would be around
23 million.
Yeah, $23 million.
23 million. So we're talking projects, but we're talking DC fast chargers, 11 of them. Is that correct?
No,
Or-
there'd be much more than that. There's at least 36 locations where this is being installed.
36 locations, and there's going to be one at each location, or are we doing,
That I don't know.
okay. Well, maybe then I could ask Comey a few more questions.
There are multiples in each location. There are 37 locations.
37 locations. So how many chargers are we going to get out of it, so to speak, Comey?
I guess double the 37
Okay.
locations, yes.
All right.
I can't do the math real quickly.
74.
There you go.
He's a whiz kid.
And-
So can you get into the soft cost versus the capital costs a little bit, Comey? It does seem, this should be a great project. I want to be, proud to vote for it, and it seems as though we're really not even making an attempt to be cost efficient. That
I
can't be
appreciate-
true, is it?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Commissioner. I think this is a unique opportunity for us. We're actually acting on a directive from the governor to install 30 of these chargers in 30 months, and so we're on a very fast timeline to install these chargers. We've also chosen to not install them just willy-nilly across the state. We've chosen to install them in areas where there is paucity of these chargers so that you can mediate the range anxiety that folks tend to have. And so these chargers are out in the middle of nowhere. I think there's a map in the presentation that shows the distribution across the state. We're using mostly our rest stops, maintenance stations, and some of our district facilities, so it's our facilities that we're installing these on. So there's some reduced cost in terms of right-of-way in that respect. With regards to the soft cost, the support cost, each one of these projects are unique, and they're not things that we've done before. So we're costing them out based on our understanding of what the project requires. It is not atypical or untypical, well, I guess maybe that's not a good word,
Whatever that word is.
to have a higher support cost to capital ratio on small projects. That's in fact the norm. When projects are smaller, you tend to have a higher capital to support ratio. To peg it arbitrarily at 50%, I think it's just setting us up to have to come back anyway, because we know it's going to exceed that. We already know it's going to exceed that. Our expectation is that we will report back on what it's going to cost to get them done, with the understanding that we are going to be as judicious as needed to manage those costs as well. But each one of these is unique, and so the support cost at each location actually varies in terms of proportion to capital, and it varies from 50 to about 100, I think.
I'm listening. It's hard to believe that they're unique to the extent that these costs would justify, but, you're the engineer, I'm not.
Not really an engineer. I think what's unique in those terms is, depending on where the location is, you may need to trench a little further
Sure, yeah.
to bring power
And
to.
you need a transformer
and
for
you
a
need
DC,
transformers. So
right?
there are a number of unique challenges that each location presents, and so each one of these projects are designed to match those challenges.
Okay, but if you need a transformer installed in a remote area on Highway 5, because we're talking about the electric highway here, which is, that's all good. That would be construction costs that are high. Why are the support costs even higher?
It's the engineering of support costs.
Okay.
That's really, it's the time to get the projects ready for construction.
On the last page, you have partnerships, which I think is a great idea, and you mention EVgo and Electrify America and other groups that I've dealt with at the Electric Vehicle Collaborative. Are they on board now? When do the partnerships develop?
The partnerships are not all secured yet. I think the one partnership that we know for sure that's on board is with the Monterey Air District at Camp Roberts. They actually will come in. They might be the first installation at that location. They're going to come in with some of their chargers. So we're working with our partners at Air Resources Board and Energy Commission to also have access to these other partnerships that are typically their stakeholders. And so we're working on all fronts. And we're not, again, just to be clear, we're not looking to go into this as another line of business for the department. We are really trying to meet a challenge that we were given by the governor to reduce the range anxiety and sort of fill in the gaps. We feel like that's really going to be what the extent of this program is, to some extent, and hopefully that the private sector and the partnerships that we're talking about will pick up the gauntlet from there on.
Just one more question, if I can. What's the status of your conversations with the California Energy Commission about funding the actual chargers? There are no chargers in this project? Or?
Yeah, the charges themselves are about $40,000 to $50,000, the installation of those. So they're a very small element of the project. We think, quite frankly, SB1 and the governor's budget that was just recently signed allows us to be able to do the whole project. I know staff has a difference of opinion, but we are talking to Energy Commission. Those conversations about actually find a different fund source for, if that's the commission's wish, for the actual charges. I think we'll have to figure that out with them. We haven't really concluded those conversations yet.
When do you think you'll wrap it up, the conversations?
I'm sorry. What was the question? I'm sorry.
When do you think you'll complete your conversations with the CEC?
I haven't been involved. I will look
Okay.
into that and get back to you,
Okay.
hopefully before the end of the week.
Okay, thank you for calling my attention to this yesterday when we crossed paths.
Jim?
If I could clarify on the number of chargers, the 37 locations, the individual chargers, we haven't procured the units, and the intention is that each one of the units would have 2 charging ports.
Okay.
Not that there would be 2 separate
Yeah.
machines, just to
That's-
clarify. So that would be the number of vehicles.
That's a good
But again,
idea.
it'll depend on the equipment that's purchased.
But it will depend on the commission action.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate Commissioner Kehoe going first because it's causing my Italian blood pressure to go down a little bit. I completely support this. I think many of you know I've been driving an electric car for 4.5 years now and very familiar with charging infrastructure. But I really do have continued serious concerns on the estimated costs, certainly the soft costs that are included in the staff report. And Comey, I realize this is direction from the governor. I've read the report several times over. However, I seriously doubt the governor would be so supportive of the high staff and support costs. I also understand what you said, that Caltrans hasn't done this before, so I guess the basic question is, why is Caltrans doing this at all? I don't understand why this kind of a project isn't something that shouldn't go out to those with the expertise that install these things all the time. DC fast chargers are not an anomaly. They are everywhere now and are continuing to grow. And for those that don't understand, level 2 chargers will go at about 14 miles per hour of charge. A DC fast charger can charge upwards of 75 miles of range or more per hour. And so on these rest stops, you want DC fast because you're going to get a faster charge, so you don't have to wait as long. Most of the chargers you see in shopping centers are what are called level 2, and they go at only at about 14 miles per hour of range. So DC fast is where it's moving. And so one of the questions just answered was only 2 per location. That's ridiculous. These things should be equipped to at least expand out to 6 to 12 per site if the state's really going to implement a zero emission vehicle protocol. I don't understand why we would spend the money to build the infrastructure to bring these things to it. And again, I'm not privy to any of the design because it was very vague in the report. But you would want to at least have the capacity to have multiple DC fast. Tesla, for example, has thousands of superchargers now around the world, and most of these supercharger sites, especially in California, range on the minimum of 6 charging stations per location, upwards of 18. So the infrastructure's been built, and it's modular and it's expandable. I haven't read any about that in here. 23.45 million for 11, or, that's 2.13 million. And then you clarified, it's okay, it's 37. The chart I had said 36, so it's grown by 1 since my download of the CD. But still, that's at 37, that's $633,000 each. Now, I grant you, it costs money to run conduit. It costs money to put in these transformers. But I really would like to see third-party validation of this to see if it could happen. And call me again, not to be picking on you, but DC fast chargers aren't 40 to 50K anymore. They're about 10,000 a piece. They've really gone down in price. So, I really think that a little bit more looking into this should be the order of the day. We ought to make sure they're expandable. As I said, the staff report is vague. I really would just end by saying we should get bids from private electrical contractors to have them compare the numbers that we've seen from Caltrans. And last but not least, as it comes to the infrastructure, there's different companies do these DC fast. Again, the report doesn't say that the state is going to provide this juice for free. I seriously doubt that, which means there's vendors out there like ChargePoint or Blink or any number of companies. And you have to have an account to use those things typically. I think some of them you can swipe a card. But I think it's important, again, these standards, if the state's doing it, there should be standards, and I didn't read any of that in there. So again, I probably speak with a little bit more experience having driven electric cars for a few years now, and I really would think that I'd like to see more on this before it moves forward today. I completely support this, doing it, but that's why I didn't make the motion, didn't second it, because I'm not ready to vote for this today. And if it's in its current form, I'd be voting no. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to support Mr. Chairman Commissioner Medaffer's comments. My concern is that we're not working with the private enterprise side. I mean, if we were working with PG&E or Southern California Edison, I'm a full supporter of expanding the electrical charging stations all throughout the state. I think we need more and more of them, but I'm really hesitant for the state to get into the business, especially if we're going to give the electricity away for free. So what have you guys done in terms of sitting down with PG&E or Southern California Edison?
Well, we've worked with the utility companies. I can't tell you the details of those, their staff working on that. I know for sure, for example, in San Diego area, we actually worked with the San Diego Air and Gas and Electric for a particular charging station that we're working with them on in San Diego. So the utilities are part of the conversation to the extent that we need to extend power and upsize the power source that we will have.
But are they going to be the vendor eventually?
All of the projects will be contracted out. We're not building them. These are going to be contracts by reputable contractors that actually do the work. What we're doing is getting the design done in-house so that we can then put those out to bid. So I would expect that if there are potential, if we've overestimated, we will see those in some of the savings. And my sense is by the time we get through the initial set of projects, we'll probably know better what the going rate is for staff time that we're putting into it. So I'm not trying to hedge my bets here on whether or not the cost will come down, but my sense is the more we do them, I think the better we're going to get at the costing that we have right now.
So, Comey, it seems to me like, we talked about the partnerships, but when I'm watching our energy planning, it's really the Energy Commission that's kind of the lead, in my opinion, in terms of helping us figure out which resources we're going to need where. So I know we talk about later having partnerships, but there's different funding tranches to the Energy Commission. I don't remember all their numbers, but should they be in the lead and we would be in the support role?
They have been with us all the way. In fact, the map that you saw up there, the way we decided on where is based on Energy Commission's assessment of where the gaps are. So they have been with us. We're part of the governor's action, ZEV task force action.
Yeah, okay.
I can't say the word, but there is in fact a working group in the governor's office that's been working on this for the last couple of years, and we're all at the table, making sure that we're all working at.
And we're covering all forms of alternative fuel, just because just this week I was at a dueling panel where the near zero and the zero folks are, going at each other in terms of who's better for what. But so are we doing the same amount of effort for those other options?
Yeah, we are on our own fleet. We're looking at all the other options. We have a plan for hydrogen, at least on our fleet. Now, this was a charge in the governor's action plan to install 30 in 30 months. And so that's what this particular program is about. Mm-hmm. And so we also have a program that will install charging stations in workplaces, which is a statewide program across all state buildings. So that's a separate program. This particular one is just for public charging.
Okay.
But we are on our fleet looking at hydrogen fueling stations and hydrogen fleet.
Well, we've spent a lot of time today about the trust that's been bestowed on all of us in terms of this SB1 money. So to the extent that some of these requests don't fall within the definition of SHOP, have you looked to see if you can put the request in a definition that they would qualify for? Because I don't think we really want to start crossing a line of what qualifies for what category, just as we're trying to really be diligent about each dollar, so.
Yeah, we're very mindful of that. That's a very serious issue for us. And I think the language in SB 1, I think it's section 2030, section D, talks about accommodating advanced automotive technologies that may include, but not limited to, charging and fueling opportunities for zero emissions. That's in statute. And so that provides, I think, some cover there. And I think we also have in the budget language that allows us to be able to do this. Otherwise, we wouldn't bring this to you if we didn't think we had the authority to do it.
Well, Carmen, I would disagree with you there. SB 1 provides you limiting language. It still does not trump the language that is in the government code.
And if I could speak to that point, this goes back to the January governor's budget. We submitted a budget change proposal to the legislature. And many of the issues that have come up in this discussion came up in those legislative budget hearings as well. What we had proposed in the January budget was some budget bill language in the SHOP item of appropriation that indicated up to $20 million could be spent on these purposes. So I have to say, we thought to the extent there was any concern on SHOP eligibility that we'd fully resolve that issue with our budget change proposal and the language in the budget, because again, it's in the SHOP item of appropriation and a specificity that up to that amount is available for this type of charging infrastructure. The other thing, though, that came up in the budget hearings was a strong desire for Caltrans to look for partnerships and try to find as much money as possible that was not road money, if you will, or highway money. And so that's part of the ongoing effort. To memorialize that direction, the legislature did ask for us to come back and report where we did have partnerships, where those partnerships were, who was a contributing partner.
Okay.
Now, in lieu of all the questions that the commissioners have raised, maybe it'd be a good idea to table this item and bring it back at the August commission meeting where more of the questions that have been raised can be answered.
I will so move.
I think we have a motion.
There's already a motion.
We have a motion on the floor?
Yeah.
Okay, who was the maker of that motion? Commissioner Gometti. Commissioner, would you withdraw your motion? What we're talking about, I'm bringing it
Yeah,
back.
he says.
And who was the second? I was. Commissioner Hart, would you withdraw your motion, your second?
Yes, the first is withdrawn, the second is also withdrawn.
I like that. So we won't need a motion to bring it back, just
There you
bring
go.
it back.
Right.
Very good.
Mr. Chair, but they're going to bring it back
We
with,
had a couple comments.
oh, okay.
Joe, then Yvonne.
I don't want to beat this to death, but 4, 5, 6 years ago, we put one of these stations in a location, and we had that it was a 2-spotter, and we had that, I think that was done for around $38,000. And as I understand this, not 100% sure, but I know an organization, a company that is going to be putting in a lot of them, and they are looking at a figure of around $8,500 to $9,000 a piece. Now that's a long ways from the $40,000 or $50,000 that we're talking about here today. I'm not 100% sure as to what I'm saying, but I'm certainly going to find out for sure. But it seems to me that if we were going to go out and do this, and we are going to design it, why didn't we, and maybe and I don't want to take away anything from the folks that are designing it for Caltrans at this point, but why wouldn't we go out to have folks design these, that's basically their business and what they do? I don't quite understand why we would be doing the designing if we have folks out there in the open field that's their business.
Good question.
The folks working on this they're not unfamiliar with buildings. We have folks that actually work on buildings and do building design. So we have engineers in our engineering services office that actually are focused on buildings and work with the state architect on things like this. But I hear your point. I think part of what we've done is to look at what the standards are out there and try to minimize what the support cost is.
You're running power inspector hands.
Oh, good, didn't go on first. Don't you have charging stations in most state buildings? Electric charging stations?
Not in all state buildings. We are partnering with our sister agency at CHP where we're co-located to install charging stations at state buildings. We have some solar chargers that we've deployed across the 12 districts where we didn't need to actually do any construction work. They're just solar, but they're slower chargers. I think they're like...
I thought I had seen some in the buildings.
There are some, but not most.
Not most, but,
No.
okay. I don't get in a lot of state buildings, but the ones that I had been, I thought I had noticed that there are some in those buildings. But I'd like to address the whole issue of the shop. It seems to me it's a safety issue on the highway. And that shop certainly it addresses that issue and maintaining safety. It's just the same thing as someone running out of gas on the highway. If you're in an electric vehicle, and I certainly know that Mr. McCafferty has probably more experience on this than I do because we just have one car, and that, but also my husband, who's been down to 5 miles, would try to get from somewhere, and his electricity is at that point, and he's pretty scared. So I do think that from the shop point and safety and highway maintenance, that we have to look at some of those issues.
Well, yes, Commissioner, we certainly would be examining all of the issues being raised today between now and the August Commission meeting. I also need to point out that we took some allocation actions under items 96, I believe 97, 98, 99, and 100. If any of those related to this shop amendment that is not being done today, then those allocations would not stand, just to make sure that everybody's clear on that. Well, no, we won't be bringing this back because we'll be bringing this back in August.
Could you repeat what you just said? I'm not following you.
This item is a shop amendment. We already took a lot of allocation actions of monies. I don't know if any of these 11 projects were not actually already allocated under other amendments, under other items on the agenda. And if they were, they need to be backed out.
Well, that's a tail wagging a big dog.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. I'm not ready to do that.
Commissioners, yeah, I would like to just state for the record that Caltrans would not seek an allocation for a project that hasn't been amended into the shop. And so I don't see this as an issue. If that is an issue, we would definitely bring that back, but that would be a bigger issue.
Well, no, this is not a council. This is an issue of how this was structured on the agenda. We went through and did allocations before we did the amendment.
Right, and I get that, but what we need to do, instead of just freaking out over this thing, is we need to look at the projects, see if any of them match here, just make sure we get some conduit in the ground, because, you know, believe me, don't put a new road up and then go digging it up. That just infuriates me to no end. So I think it's pretty easy. You've got 37 places you need to go into. Cross-check it. You can do that by tomorrow, I would hope, with the stuff that we did today, and just let us know if there's any conflict tomorrow. And then it's up to us to work it out so that that conflict is resolved. Because we don't want to hold up all this money just because we got a couple of nickels floating around over there.
No, we're not suggesting you hold any of the money up, just the ones that are associated with this amendment.
Right, and we make sure that's included in the design. We got to be able to figure that out.
We'll identify, if any of these showed up in the allocations on the projects,
Right.
We'll identify where they are and you can take an action to remove them tomorrow.
Okay,
So
we're kind of beating
that.
this thing into the ground here.
Could I just make what I'd like to see Comey come back with next month, not tomorrow, is some idea of how these things are going to operate when they are installed, who you're, if you've got a vendor on board by then, or a process for hiring a vendor, how the driver will access it. Will they have to have a membership or an account with a charging network company? It's not going to be as easy as putting them into the Silicon Valley or Rancho Santa Fe or San Diego, because these are long distances. And I know some of the companies backed away from installing infrastructure north of Sacramento because they don't want to have the responsibility of servicing something, 100 miles north of Sacramento at 2 o'clock in the morning. So I'm not saying this is easy. It has to be done, and the governor is right to direct you guys to do it. But I think you need to come back with a more thoughtful project and bring the costs into reasonable alignment. Even for an inaugural project, this seems so high.
So Yvonne, that means your husband can't drive out the city. Last comment, and we're going to move forward.
I didn't really understand your project schedule, Comey, so I think what you're hearing here is perhaps a 60-day delay. We don't meet in July, right? So we come back in August? So,
well, by tomorrow, they'll have the conflict list, and then they've got to come back with their stuff. We just want to make sure we're not.
Yeah, I know we're not doing that, but I don't know what schedule he was on.
Well, our schedule was to be done by December of 2018. That's the charge we have in the executive order. We're not probably going to meet that, because I think but we're going to struggle to get to that point. We were already pushing against that deadline.
I think that
this isn't a bridge.
I know.
You're laying conduit and putting a pole up.
I think the point we just need to keep in mind is the cost
was that
issue.
2020? 2018. 2018.
I think I think the goal here is to get this out as soon as possible as part of the SB1 program. I think everybody here has been hollering to get everything we can out. I think that is part of I think we would also like to see that. There's some blanching here on the cost. I guess my question is that stuff that cannot be resolved until August, or if we just deferred this item until tomorrow, are there questions that could be answered and run up the flagpole and figure out if some of this stuff is worth holding up for 2 months? That's all.
I'd rather move it, but.
Commissioners, the staff recommendation.
Okay, well, all the boys and girls have homework now. So tomorrow, if they can bring it back tomorrow, we'll take it up tomorrow, no biggie. If not, but we want to make sure there's no conflicts on the project. Got that, Bruce?
Yep, I got it.
Okay. All right, thank you. So now, we're going to take we can take up 129, or we can go home. What do you guys want to do?
Let's take it up.
All right, 129.
Commissioners, item 129 is an action item to approve financial allocations for 47 ATP projects. There are some changes to these allocations that are noted on the change list. Staff has reviewed these allocations and found them consistent with the ATP guidelines and recommends your approval.
Motion by, which one was it there? Motion by Tavaloni, second by Madaffer. Any questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. All right, we're done for today. Tomorrow we're going to be starting on 80. Hang on.
Tomorrow we're going to be starting on item 82.